second episode of our rapid fire chats with WeRaise. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction for you. So we have with us today Salma Nasir, who is the partner investments lead for Microsoft in Middle East and Africa. She has over 16 years of international experience in helping government financial institutes, as well as telecom operators transform digitally with Microsoft Cloud Services and Solutions. She also holds a bachelor's in computer science from FAST National University in Pakistan. And she is also a founder of a female startup incubator. So Salma, all set to start?
Let's go.
Perfect. Okay, so for my first question, what are the 3 words that you would use to best describe your personality?
All right, first of all, thank you very much, Armin. Thank you for having me here. It's really a pleasure. And 3 words, I would choose, that's 3 words, but not the words for the personality: energy, commitment, and discipline.
Awesome. Those are really nice. Okay, so you work at Microsoft. Sorry?
No, sorry. I just said I hope that works.
Yes, that was great. Thank you. So you work at Microsoft, like we all know. So can you describe how your journey has been?
It's been super exciting, full of learning, adventure, and growth. I actually started back in 2006 as part of their college hires program. And I worked in the Pakistan market for some time. And then I moved over to become part of the Middle East and Africa team. And then, from there, it was just continuous movement from one role between teams, customer segments, geographies. And I think there are 2 things that I value the most in this whole journey. I would say, is diversity. So I think you learn the most just through your interaction with people from different backgrounds, cultures, and how we're all trying to create value under the same circumstances and using the same technological tools that are there, but just, our way of approaching things are so different that leads to such different outcomes in different places. And I think the second one is, I am personally a person that's driven by impact. I chose the word energy, but I could also use impact. So, I strive for impact, whether it's for social, cultural, or technological. So I think Microsoft we really do try and empower people and organizations to achieve more. So it's absolutely been fulfilling from that perspective as well.
That's so great. Thank you so much for sharing. I feel like there's a lot of learning and great experiences involved in your journey. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Like I mentioned earlier, so you are a startup founder for Grassroots Ventures. So what is one of the best advice that you've received throughout your startup journey?
This one is, I usually laugh, and you will laugh too, but I will share it anyway. The best advice that I received just as I started this journey was, and I will have to mimic the expressions because I absolutely, adore the mentor who also gave me that advice. And it came as exactly like this: Salma, stick to Microsoft. So, I think, for some time that really baffled me because I thought, here I was doing this great pitch and, really presenting it out there. But I think that, jokes aside, I think that was something that really kind of helped me level set and relook at everything. And I think that really put me on a different path altogether in terms of this entrepreneurial journey.
That's great. I think this would also sort of seep into my second question for you. So what is one lesson during your startup journey that you learned the hard way?
And I think that it's usually we are consistent in the lessons that we learn professionally, personally, in your entrepreneurial journey. For me, it's definitely been how not to be a victim of your own enthusiasm. And I told you again, I think it all goes back to the energy, the impact, the need for impact. And I think sometimes it's so easy to get lost what I would say becoming a victim of your enthusiasm. So the biggest lesson has been to dream carelessly, dream limitlessly, but then assess cautiously and be sure that you can draw a fine line between going after your dreams and being foolish. and then being able to cut your losses and exiting gracefully. And I say this, I think the last piece for me has been the most, I would say, valuable learning is exit gracefully when you can.
I think this is a very valuable piece of advice, and any female entrepreneur that is going to watch this is definitely going to benefit from this. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so for my next question, what in your opinion is one of the biggest misconception that people have when it comes to working with startups?
So I think that also depends on who we're talking about in terms of who is working with these startups. What I have often seen, Armin, in my experience, and also because I come from the corporate world, so I've also, a lot of those interactions happen. A lot of our veterans in the VC space are also having, they draw from their experiences in the corporate world. And I think they're absolutely valuable, right? I think there is more merit to having a VC-backed startup in terms of the mentorship and the coaching that you get versus the financial is of course there. But I think sometimes where I have seen people get sidetracked is in trying to gauge a startup progress by scales that are made for and by people in the enterprise space, right? And I think there's definitely merits in drawing from lifelong experiences of the corporate world that we come from, right? But I think the way we should look at adapting those in the startup space, especially for the early stage startups, is just very, very unique and different. So we have to be very careful in how we adapt and implement those governance processes and all of that within the startup space. Now, one can argue, and people often argue when I put that argument, is that one of the reasons that 90% of the startups fail because of the unwillingness to learn from, the governance that has been laid out and the expert advice. Maybe, right? And maybe we can start a trend on Twitter to find out what people think. But I think for me, that has been, I've noticed that consistently, is that ability or inability to kind of bridge that gap in when you've spent your entire career in large enterprises, corporations that definitely bring a lot of value. But then how do you translate that into the startup world?
No, this was great. I completely agree. I liked the Twitter idea as well. I think we can definitely think about that. Okay, so who has been the best mentor in your life? So this could be, at your workplace, during your startup journey, or even in your personal life.
So I think for me, there has been one consistent mentor that I have had for, I would say, the last decade or so. And it's one of my ex-bosses, actually. I think I owe everything that I learned about sales, about building relationships based on delivering value. I think that was really, my orientation into the whole value creation mode of customer acquisition and sales. And I think, the best advice, it's funny, even though it comes from he was my mentor on the professional side, but and that applies professionally as well as personally, is something that he just made in passing without even realizing. I was, as usual, when we're young, you get excited by those big deals you want to close. And, so I did. One of the biggest deals I was working on, it landed. And, he just made a very slight comment and he said, Salma, stay grounded. And, that's something that just stuck to me. And then you realize, you look around you and you look at the people and the ones who are truly successful, both in their professional careers themselves, as well as in being effective mentors to the community, are the ones who are able to actually, stay humble, stay grounded, and being always open to having a growth mindset and being open to learning. I think that's really what I believe now also makes great mentors.
That's completely true. Okay, so for my next question, Salma, what is your take on the current startup trend that is, prevalent in Pakistan as well as the MENA region?
So I think just because you mentioned Armin, Pakistan, so I will take just literally 1 second to digress. And just given the situation that the country is going through right now, based on the floods and the devastation that we're seeing, I just want to maybe pause for 1 minute, because it's honestly these days, that's all that's top of mind for all of us, right? So I think even to those that are watching, my humble request would be work with your closest charity, whoever you work with. It can be a group of friends, it can be an NGO, it can be a charity, but whoever is there on the ground. And Pakistanis are doing a lot of effort on the ground for recovery and rehabilitation. So please reach out and support in whatever way you can. So apologies for digressing there for just a second.
It's much needed. Thank you so much for that.
And look, now coming to the trends from a startup perspective, I think, look, we all know Pakistan saw a game-changing year last year, right? And before we knew it, we had the global recession that had been looming over our heads for quite some time. We all predicted it. We all understood that while COVID in itself was, going to have an impact, post-COVID is when we would actually see the economic impact downstream, right? So we were all prepared for it, but then you're never prepared for it enough. So, and there we got hit. And, now, of course, there's extreme amount of caution when it comes to holding on to your money. And then Pakistan in itself is going through one of the most, I would say, unfortunate turns in history, again, with our political challenges, unfortunately, climate challenges, as well as economic challenges. So, but I don't think it's all gloom and doom. I think the message for the startups, especially let's just talk about Pakistan for now, is, use this time. I also ventured into this space as soon as the downturn started, right? So I think there is merit in, this is the time where you can build your product, play around with your product, get some customers on board. Even if you can get 10, 20, 50 customers to validate your price point, use this time to build your product market fit. And then by the time that, again, and I will say it again, it's not that the money has stopped pouring in. We've all been reading the news, the work that Tanya has been doing with D-Bank and the Cloudways acquisition and all of that. So for sure, it's not all doom and doom, right? There is still money. But of course, it's going to be carefully channeled into those that are creating the most value downstream. And I think that's where you need to focus. Focus on creating value and accelerating value, no matter what stage you're at from your startup journey perspective. And especially for me, I personally feel, I could be wrong, that for those startups that are still at an idea stage, if you're able to, accumulate, bootstrap, play around, experiment, try and build your customer base. And then by the time you're at that place where you've established, you validated your price point, your business model, in the next 12, 18, 24 months, the time would be right for you to, start looking at fundraising per se, once the hype kicks back in. So I think that would be my message. It's definitely not all gloom and doom. Let's keep driving, let's keep delivering value. And when you deliver value, honestly, I think outcomes happen.
Yeah, no, that was a very positive message. Okay, so just a follow-up question to this. What type of startups really stand out to you and why?
I mean, I also see that a little bit differently from, our from the more senior veterans in this space, especially. For me, it's always been about, and the reason I got into this space is, for me, there are two things that I'm personally very passionate about, right? So A is female-founded startups. So I definitely have a conscious bias there. Let me say that. And the other one is, if you've got an idea that will have a positive impact on the social or economic outcome for Pakistan, I'm sold, right? So whether it means creating employability or it just means, financial inclusion for women, anything through which I feel we genuinely will have an impact on the bottom line from a socio-economic perspective for Pakistan, that's where my heart goes.
That's awesome. I think that's why we're also very lucky to have you as part of the WeRaise community. Okay, so coming back to your professional life. So currently you are a lead at Microsoft. So just, let us know, what is your leadership style at work? How do you keep your team motivated?
Well, I think we should ask our teams that, right? Because we can all have certain impressions of ourselves that may have nothing to do with reality. But look, for me, I can tell you the principles that I go by, right? So for me, I think the core principle of leadership is to create more leaders. And I have tried to instill that within the teams that I have worked with at home with my daughter. she's full of energy, wild child, but I absolutely love that. So I think it's important to make sure that we're creating leaders and not, getting stuck in that I want to build my empire to have my followers mindset. So I'm very conscious of that. And then I think, but then at the same time, you have to bring a certain energy to the table again, right? To really motivate the teams. And the other big thing is being able to lead with clarity and simplicity. I think
that's awesome. And I think your team is very lucky to have a manager slash boss like you. Okay, so you've also worked with the Microsoft Cloud Services and Solutions. So what do you think the future holds for this?
On that one, I mean, look, cloud services and solutions for me, we are in the future, right? And it is the future. Now, the way I would look at it is how can the businesses then, start to leverage and look at that platform and framework of cloud services and solutions to really accelerate and grow. And I think that's where the key lies. And it's funny, we were just having this discussion with some of our partners a few weeks ago. There has actually been research has proven that cloud-oriented businesses actually drive 1.8 times more in gross profit compared to their counterparts. And when you couple that, because now everyone's aware of the need to go on the SaaS model, subscription model, but why are we doing that, right? We're doing that to be able to remove the traditional barriers to access, to remove the barriers to growth. You could have built a service for fraud determination, for determining fraud in a financial services institute in Pakistan, and then nothing stops you from putting that up on the cloud, given the legislative workarounds in other places of the world. So really, when you top that up, when you top up the ability to host something on the cloud with offering a unique IP on top of it, which is what your business should be focused on, that's also proven by research. That's where you actually are able to increase your valuation 7 to 10 times more in terms of EBITDA compared to those that only rely on cloud solutions without adding the specialization and intellectual property piece to it. Because once you've created an IP that customers love, you're solving a problem, whether it's for governments or customers, you're going to have those recurring revenue streams that will be the retention for which will be very, very low, and that they'll be very, very easy to scale. So I think that's the piece that we really want to make sure that our startups also that I work with, I always advise them. It's great to have, you can always build a service, but the moment you make it cloud oriented and you add your, the specialization that you have with the cloud economics, you really are set out on an exponential growth path from a profitability and valuation perspective.
This is very informative, Salma. Thank you so much. Okay, so what are 3 ways that you think that Microsoft has helped startups? Any programs, any softwares?
Sure. So look, from a Microsoft perspective, everything is part of our Microsoft Founders Hub program. So whatever we do in Microsoft for Startups is through the Founders Hub program. And the whole idea behind that, and I hope the audience are aware of it. If not, we're happy to have a more a formal session on that at another time. But Founders Hub, what our principle is that we want to be able to democratize access to startup services, whether it's technical services. So, we offer lots of free credits up to about $350,000 for a certain amount of time. And that's a lot of credits for a startup, right? From a cloud consumption perspective. So that gives you the ability to come develop your product, test your product, run it. And then I think that the biggest thing is the business mentorship that you also get by being part of the network. So you get access to coaches, guides, mentors, and more importantly, you also become part of this community where you can now share your challenges, opportunities with other startups from all over the world. And that's why we encourage everyone to, go on to Founders Hub, register yourselves. It's free. Play around with the platform, get access to resources, tools. There's tons of information available, both from a technical as well as business coaching perspective. And it's online, it's free. So that's how we look at startups, is to just making sure that they all have access equitably to product creation as well as business acceleration services.
That's awesome. And I think it's something that's very beneficial for all the startups that are coming into the ecosystem. Okay, so for my last question, so you know about WeRaise, the program that we have. So how do you think programs like WeRaise, you know, what Microsoft is doing, how do you think they're helping women-led startups? How would you think they're contributing to the rise in numbers of women-led startups? And why do you think such programs are important?
Look, I think people often say we need, things for women empowerment. For me, I say our women are already empowered. We don't need empowerment. The challenge and the blocker that we have is access. And what you guys are doing with WeRaise and what so many other female, female programs are doing for that are run specifically to help females raise funding for their startups is exactly solving that challenge, right? Access to not just finances, by the way. So funding is, of course, part of the puzzle. But of course, we're also, as women, we have a bigger blocker compared to our male counterparts in accessing business skills, communication skills. I have seen the smartest of women not being able to present their ideas just in an articulate, business savvy way that would resonate with an investor, right? And the moment you spend 2-3 weeks with them, what comes out in the end is just absolutely, amazing. So, and I think, look, women have superpowers. Okay, I've always said we're not able to, everything that we do, whether it's from motherhood to professional careers or to entrepreneurs, I think it's just a matter of how we're helping them harness those powers. And that's exactly what you guys are doing. And that's why I'm the most excited. I'm very excited about this program as well, because I think the moment we can really help democratize, again, this access piece, we will see our daughters will wake up to a different Pakistan, let's just say.
Definitely. And we're also so excited to have you part of the WeRaise community. So Salma, this brings us to the end of our rapid fire chat. So thank you once again for taking out the time and welcome to the WeRaise community. If you have any parting advice, any words that you would like to share.
I think I've said a lot. I would just like to say thank you. And thank you very much for having me. And absolutely, it's an opportunity for me to be inspired by all of you amazing women, by all the work that all these amazing women are doing, like yourselves. So absolutely thrilled to be here and really looking forward to learning and hopefully contributing as well towards the growth.
Likewise. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Salma.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.